That's fairly new. So for those of you who may be in that tech and design area, I'm your person in terms of employer engagement. And so really my goal is to connect employers like some of the ones that are here with our students who, they want to recruit, they would like to engage. And so that's really the work that I do. On the diversity recruiting side, my job is to really kind of partner and strategize with employers who want to engage in diverse talent. And I really appreciate you guys making time today.
Thank you for everyone who coordinated, including our panelists. Molly Ryan-Miller, I will let you introduce yourself as you hold a few different hats here at DePaul. But I figured given the breadth of the consulting industry and profession, it would be helpful to have something to ground us as we move forward with our discussion. So Molly, I'll turn it over to you for our profession overview.
Thanks, Annie. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Molly. The hat I wear in specific to being involved with this event is I'm actually the consultant club president, which is open to undergrad and grad. So hopefully everyone on this call is one of those and you can join us. But Annie asked me to give just a little bit of overview to the consulting profession to kind of set the stage for what all the panelists are going to be talking about today. We understand that consulting is super ambiguous, so we just wanted to kind of break it down a little bit. I'm sure all of you are here because you have some level of interest in the consulting career path, but just to kind of help you out, if you enjoy learning about different topics, working and collaborating in teams, solving complex problems, you like change, like learning from others, then probably it's a good fit to go down the consulting path. Businesses bring on consultants to help find them the root cause of a problem. And then we're going to go in and recommend a solution. That could be technical or it could be a business solution, but generally we're going in to help solve a complex problem and offer up a solution. In this profession, you're also going to build a ton of business acumen, some technical aptitude as well, but you're going to constantly be learning new skill sets. So if that's something you like, then consulting is probably a good career path for you. And quickly, just kind of overall, you enjoy working in teams, solving complex problems, you value learning and growth, so you really like training opportunities and kind of teaching yourself things on the fly. And also, it's a really good career opportunity if you want to leave your options open. A lot of skills you're going to use in consulting can translate to other professions. And so maybe you want to do consulting now, but you're not sure what you want to do in a couple of years. This is a great track to kind of get the most out of your skills now and kind of translate those to different professions later. So I think that kind of just sets the stage, hopefully, for what a lot of our panelists have experienced and what we're going to be talking about today. Thanks, Annie.
Beautiful, thank you. We'll go ahead and go down the line, so to say. I recognize we're on Zoom with our panelist introduction. So I will call names as I see them. Now, again, I'm between two tabs, so I apologize in advance if I miss or repeat, but we'll go ahead and start with Michael. Can you please tell us a little bit about where you studied? What did you study? How did you discover the consulting pathway? And where do you work now? And what's your role?
Of course. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Michael Elleru. I went to Michigan State University for my undergrad, and I majored in human biology there. And I also went to Loyola University here in Chicago, where I got my master's in the arts of medical sciences. I actually discovered consulting through my brother, who is a former consultant, and also my best friend who referred me to my current company, which, like I said, Slalom, where I am currently an associate consultant under the Business Advisory Services umbrella. I'm currently focusing on talent optimization and organizational effectiveness. So.
Thank you. Next, we have Molly, and I know we've semi-introduced you as well, but if you could hit those points, that would be great.
Sure, thanks, Annie. For undergrad, I studied at Indiana University in Bloomington. And I'm also currently doing my MBA. I finish in the spring quarter here at DePaul. For undergrad, I studied computer sciences with focuses in business, public health, communication and culture, and human sexuality. So a little bit all over the place there. And early on in my career, I picked up that I liked the people portion of my career almost as much as I liked the technical part. So I decided to combine the two. And right now I'm working as a technical consultant at Deloitte, where I'm in the global technology, data and analytics practice. And right now I'm focused in the Power BI reporting space.
Thank you. And next we have Leah.
Hi, I'm Leah Riano. I went to DePaul. I had graduated my undergrad in 2011 and I got a master's in organizational communication and training and development in 2015. I got into consulting via LinkedIn. I think I've gotten my last 5 jobs through LinkedIn and networking with recruiters through LinkedIn and just letting them know what I was looking for. I was already working in tech, but I was interested in finding something that was a little bit more cutting edge than what I was doing at my last role. And my current company is Cognizant Soft Vision, where I do IT services consulting as a product owner, as a business analyst.
Thank you. Next, we have Melinda.
Hi, folks. I am a Texas A&M graduate, so a little bit far from Chicago, but our firm based in Houston recently combined with Ashling Partners, Chicago-based, and we are a boutique consulting firm that implements what we call robotic process automation software. So it uses a little bit of AI, ML, we call it intelligent automation, where essentially we go out there, identify a business process, see if we can automate it through UI or APIs and other technical areas. And then we also do optimization. So, where's the pain points in the process, help you identify that. So really what Molly said about the overview of you identify pain points and you may implement software or you may implement process change. That's really the essence of what we do at Ashling. So that's me.
Thank you. Now we have Samantha.
Hi, everybody. I'm Samantha. I also go by Sam. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I graduated from DePaul with a degree in marketing in 2020, so I'm a pandemic grad. And I currently work for Accenture. I started back in October as a consulting analyst, and I'm doing a marketing project right now. So, yeah.
Wonderful. And I think last but not least, we have Brian.
Hi, everyone. My name is Brian Chan. I studied at DePaul, graduated in 2021, studying finance. I discovered the consulting pathway actually via an alum who I found from LinkedIn. And I work with Michael at Slalom, and I am an associate consultant there.
Awesome. So as you all can see, a lot of broad diversity already just on our panel side alone, let alone in this room. We've already covered a little bit of where these folks came from. I want to dive a little bit deeper and ask everyone in the panel, if you will. I know we have a lot of folks, but I'd love you all to chime in. What were some of the most impactful experiences in your college career? And again, I'll verbally cue down the line again. So Michael, would you like to kick us off with most impactful experiences in your college career?
Yeah, so you guys could probably tell based off my majors that I was pre-med focused in college. And so I was part of a lot of organizations that, really were team-based. So I went to Honduras for Global Brigade, but the whole entire project was a team-based project. And I just enjoy working with others. I'm not someone who can just do 8 hours of solo work. So that is sort of what I think was the most impactful thing for me to sort of, look towards consulting, which I think I'll actually dive into later in the panel.
Thanks. How about you, Molly?
I think for me, and this was true in undergrad and grad school, probably the student organization piece. I think whether you're involved in leadership or just as a participant, you're learning so much from other people, which you're also doing in consulting, especially if you're on a leadership track, you're implementing processes, you're making change, you're growing with direct reports. So I think just experiencing student orgs. I was also the VP of the consulting club in undergrad as well, which I think just kind of spearheaded that career path. But I think just learning from your peers at school is something that not everyone gets to do while they're also working. So I definitely encourage that if you're in undergrad or grad.
Leah, what did you do in college that meant a lot?
So that's interesting. I also did a global brigades. I did 2 of them. I went to Honduras and also Ghana. And that's a great experience if you have the opportunity to do it, to get out of your comfort zone and go and see your work be impactful almost right away. So I would definitely agree with that. Also, I did some let's see, it's been a little while for me. But I was in a professional business fraternity, which was a great opportunity to just be around like-minded people who also had goals similar to mine. And they've also helped me in years since, just as contacts for getting jobs or feedback about different employers that I've interviewed with. So that's been great.
So Melinda, you offer some geographic diversity to this panel, obviously coming from the US South. What was your college experience like? What were some things that you did down there?
Right. So, you know, Texas A&M, for y'all, it's Agricultural and Mechanical College of Texas. My degree was in Management of Information Systems, which I failed to mention before, but that's really a business degree with a little bit of a technical spin on it without any specific area defined. It's just business general. So that being said, what recruits very heavily out of A&M, and this is geographical, Annie, like you said, is energy companies, and we're big in oil and gas, which is a little bit different from, you know, areas in Chicago and such. So that is my experience, largely energy centric around recruiting, and that's actually goes into the topic of my internship, which was with a gas pipeline company initially. And that is how I got into consulting. Kind of oddly enough, I was just an intern there, working in my cubicle, and then we had consultants with the group there, and they brought me on, and they're like, hey, you know, we think you could be a great fit for this specific software implementation. How about you consider consulting? I was like, I had never considered consulting. I knew I was going energy industry because that's who recruited the most out of the college, and that's where my chances were. So that's a little bit of a different path than I know others have taken, because, you know, and I really think that comes to consider consulting, even if you don't actually know what that is. And that's why hosting this panel is so helpful, because really it's just applying your knowledge to different areas. And maybe you have domain knowledge in healthcare or manufacturing or some different area that's not energy related. So that's kind of how I got into consulting, and a little bit of diversity on the industry. So thanks, Annie.
Thank you. And then Sam, how about you?
Yes, so I had a lot of great experiences at DePaul, thankfully. One of my major ones, I was involved in my sorority Sigma Lambda Gamma. I held almost every executive position, including like marketing and presidency. I was also very involved in the Multicultural Greek Council, and I did 3 study abroad programs. I also formerly worked in the study abroad office at one point. But I have like experience doing short-term and long-term. I did France, India, and Italy, and all of them were like phenomenal experiences. So I highly recommend that. If anybody has questions about that, please ask me. But I think it's great to interact with people of different cultures, different backgrounds, different communication styles. And I think that that's where I grew a lot as a person, because I got those soft skills that aren't necessarily taught easily.
Brian, what did you do in college that was impactful in terms of career or personal development?
I would say being proactive and getting as many internships as I could. I know it might be more difficult or not, depending on the environment for others, but for me, internships allowed me to meet many different people, learn what I did and didn't like. I was interning for capital markets firm in their derivatives group, and I was working 100+ hours a week. And I discovered I don't really like that, but then I liked other aspects of that, which consulting had. So, and then on top of that, many of the other internships that I've had where I've discovered, hey, I like this aspect, but I don't like that aspect as much. So for me, it was mainly my work experience coming into undergrad, and then coming out of undergrad as well.
Awesome, thank you. A lot of what you all touched on are pretty universal across college experiences. Obviously, we've got some DePaul representation too. Sam, thank you so much for bringing up some like institution-specific things. I think the answer to that question is it can be anything, right? Like Sam, you mentioned learning abroad, learning those soft skills and core competencies. So thank you all for sharing that. So next, I'd like to direct this question to Brian and Leah. Can you tell us about some resources or experiences that you would tell your college self to take advantage of while in school, either institution specific or general? And we'll go Leah, then Brian.
Yeah, sure. So one thing that I did, and I only did it once, I feel like it's something that I should have done more. The Ask program at DePaul had professionals come in and do mock interviews. So this is going back several years. I don't know if they still do this, but that was a really great opportunity to talk to real professionals, adults, you know, not just necessarily doing mock interviews with your friends or your student organizations, but getting to talk to someone who really interviews people on a regular basis. Sometimes walking in front of someone who literally had not seen your resume before and then asking you exactly what was in front of them on a piece of paper, just things like that, that prepare you for going out and interviewing in the real world, because that's kind of what it's like. It's not necessarily the same as when you might do a mock interview with a friend or someone in a class. And the other thing is just networking on campus. I was involved in like one student organization, but I've seen that sort of come up. I've interviewed people who were in that same fraternity years later. I have reached out to people who were in that organization and gotten feedback from them on like potential employers. I got a great tip about when to leave the organization I was about to accept an offer from, and it actually was spot on. I thought about it when I left 3 years later. So just making sure that you make time for those things and taking advantage of those resources on campus and those student organizations, because they do come in handy later on. That's it for me.
Brian, how about you?
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Leah. I would piggyback off of that a little bit and say the Ask network can be very helpful. For me, I would tell my college self, my previous college self, to utilize LinkedIn. And that's because LinkedIn is such a powerful tool. It allows you to see what your potential possibly could be. You know, when I first came to DePaul, I initially thought, man, I'd be so happy if I was just in commercial banking or I got some credit officer, retail banking role. And then upon looking on LinkedIn, I saw what people with similar backgrounds to me with no experience had, and they were able to accomplish so many different things. So that opened the door wide for me to explore. I even asked some of those people. So that's the power of LinkedIn. You can see what your potential is. You could talk to those people as well. You can send them a message. Maybe they may or may not reply, but what's powerful is that if they don't reply, just send another message. And so there's also LinkedIn Learning. I sound like a LinkedIn sales rep right now, but it's such a powerful tool. LinkedIn Learning, and then you could apply on there. Your resume is posted if you set up your profile. So it's all in one job and networking and learning hub. And it's such a powerful tool, and that's what I would use. And I would still use now.
Thank you. And I will put a reminder down for myself to share out some of our Career Center resources in terms of how to set up that LinkedIn. We have some really wonderful in-person, virtual, asynchronous resources. So I will put that reminder down for myself. Thank you too. The next question we have, who do you look for inspiration or mentorship? And in the realm of mentorship, also sponsorship and advocacy in your role. We'll go Molly and then Brian on that one.
Sure, thanks, Annie. I think I have two answers. One would be I've had a few bosses prior to the role I'm in now that I think were just fantastic. For those of you on the Slalom call, Steve Butler is definitely a mentor of mine. He's currently one of the directors at Slalom, and prior to that was a director at Deloitte, and a couple bosses from my time at Medtronic when I lived in Minnesota. Kind of the second branch of that, I'm very involved in the youth career development space within Chicago. I actually sit on the Associates Board of Genesis Works Chicago. If any of you are interested in giving back to organizations that deal with youth, definitely check them out. But I think working with youth who's determined to kind of better their career path and learn while they're in high school is just so inspiring for me 8 years into my career. So I honestly get inspiration and mentorship from working with the younger youth within Chicago.
Thanks for sharing, Molly. I would say for me, I look up to one of the alums I connected with, surprise, on LinkedIn. and he had a similar path to me. He followed the investment banking route, got offers similar to me, and decided at a weird turn just to shift to consulting. And so he's been a mentor to me. So in the sense that he's been able to, he's like 1 year or 2 years ahead of me. So at every turn, he knows exactly what I'm going through, and it's very recent. So for me, I would recommend as advice to just find someone who has somewhat of a similar path to you. If not, all perspectives are welcome. But for me, this alum has been really helpful in my development.
Thank you. So the next question we've alluded to a bit already. Did you have any internships either in consulting or in a different field or profession at any point in your college career or right after? So Melinda, you've alluded to this a bit, so we'll start with you and then we'll go to Sam.
Yeah, I kind of already stated how I started out in the energy industry, and just I had kind of, if anything, a little bit anti-consulting. I was like, that's not for me. That's accounting people stuff. That's a way of life. And so it really just opened up. It's like, if you have a domain knowledge, if you have a particular interest that you already know, like healthcare, familiarizing yourself with the kinds of software they use and what a person's job could look like on a day-to-day basis really gives you that step ahead. So when you're actively out there pursuing jobs, seeing opportunities that you didn't see before, right? So, whether it's energy-centric consulting or another one, every organization is structured a certain way. They have certain functions they need to perform. And that's just really the basis of it. Is internships can bring you into some place you didn't even expect. So did not expect to take that consulting, basically 180 from thinking I was going to end up in a single industry. So get exposure to multiple industries now, which is exciting. So that's it.
Yeah, also building on that, I didn't have any consulting experience. I didn't have any internships. I thought it was like a finance bro thing, because at DePaul, like only like the finance bros talked about it. I was like, that's not for me. But here I am today, and every summer I did have an internship, but it was usually like marketing related. So initially I did one that was like financial literacy with youth across Chicago, and I also helped them with their like social media marketing. Then I did one that was a mixture of talent acquisition and marketing with a commercial real estate company downtown. And then I had one with Steel and doing their marketing. So all very different experiences. And I got to know like what I enjoyed and didn't enjoy. So I highly recommend that. And it's never too late either. A lot of people think that, once you get to a certain point in college that you can't apply to internships anymore. Like you can have one your senior year if you wanted to. You can have it during the school year and this, but definitely don't sell yourself short and always apply, because I sent out tons of applications before I actually got hired too.
Thank you. How do you continue to grow and develop in your role? We'll go Molly and then Leah.
Thanks, Annie. Like Brian alluded to, training on LinkedIn is definitely a space that I play on it as well. Udemy, for those of you who don't know, that platform is also fantastic. It's like $10, $15 trainings. They're not certifications, but you get the knowledge there. But I think just keeping yourself up to date in whatever industry or specialty that you're working in is really important. It's also fun just to keep your skills sharp, and it makes you able to kind of move around within your company or look elsewhere and actually be like a good candidate outside your firm. I think the other thing is networking. So again, using LinkedIn for that, but just, making those genuine connections with people in your professional and your personal network. You never know who's going to be able to help you and when. So just always being genuine when you're networking, I think, is really important as well.
Am I up?
You're up, Leah.
Okay. So working in IT, it's critical that I know at least a little bit about technology. I'm actually in a non-technical role, but my job is literally often to get the technical people to explain to me what they need, and then get the business people to explain to me what they need. And figure out how to explain to both groups what the other one wants, because often those two just don't talk, don't think they understand each other. They think they're on separate planets, even if we all have the same goal. So I'm sort of this translator. So it really helps to have an awareness of what is currently, cutting edge in the industry. But also as a consultant, at least in this role, I'm required to do 40 hours of training a year, and that's not billable time. So if I've got time off, or like on nights and weekends, I've got to come up with 40 hours worth of career advancing training to do. And if it's like a certification, my employer will pay for it. This past year, I became a safe certified product owner. That was a 2-day training. And it took about a week of studying a very tedious study guide to get through the exam, but my employer paid for that. I'm a certified Scrum Master. But anything that really applies to your job is helpful. So to get those 40 hours that my employer actually counts, LinkedIn Learning, Udemy coursework is great. Podcasts about business analysis or technology, those count. Any sort of reading that you might do that is relevant to your job. And also, like Molly said, the networking is great too. I am interested in doing more with data analytics, just because it's a space sort of adjacent to what I'm working in. And I had a professor from DePaul from 7 years ago who no longer teaches at DePaul, lives in a completely different state, provide a recommendation for me for a grad school application, because I'm considering going back to grad school for data analytics. And to be able to reach out to someone from 7 years ago that you took a class with, and for them to remember you and say, hey, yeah, absolutely, I can help you with this. That was great. So that's something else that I'm doing, that I'm considering toward just keeping my skills sharp. So.
Awesome, thank you. Next we have, did you consider any other career pathways in addition to consulting? And some of you all have somewhat answered this question already, but we'll turn it over to Melinda, then Michael, then Sam.
All right, so I've already talked about this a little bit, but I do want to piggyback off what Leah said, because she was talking about billable hours, which is something that's first and foremost on every consultant's time. This is kind of what consulting is, right? Okay, you are the asset. You are in charge of going out and earning the company money. It's a different structure as compared to a company that builds airplanes. They go sell airplanes. So that's kind of a role and skill set that you develop, is presenting yourself and communicating your value and delivering results to the client. So that's really a big aha moment for me in consulting, is the value is from you. And so that's a really key driver for me in my role as a consultant. And if that's something that interests you, of being constantly given the chance to prove your worth, and imposter syndrome gets in there all the time still, but that's really a big opportunity for that. And that's just where I felt the need to elaborate, because yes, energy industry, run-of-the-mill A&M grad has been established, but really the 180 that I took, and the joy that I found in being able to see such a wide variety of people benefit from consultants being involved, is really what drives my career choice and my continued development in different technical skill sets. So that's a little bit off topic exactly to the question, but Leah brought up a great point.
Then Michael, do you want to talk a little bit about career pathways that you considered in addition to consulting? And full disclosure, I was Michael's advisor, so I know a thing or two about his path, but can you elaborate for us?
Yeah, I think I could do that. It's kind of funny. I was telling Annie right before this call that a year ago, consulting was not even in my vocabulary. So a year ago, I was applying to medical school, and unfortunately, the cycle was not in my favor, which is, okay in the long run. But at this time, I was, with my pre-med background, so focused on the content that I knew, that I was only looking at, healthcare positions, like, maybe healthcare administration, maybe becoming a lab technician, clinical research. At one point was debating even going to get a degree in education and becoming professor for human sciences. And so those careers, like I said, I was so focused on the content that I sort of lost sort of in the mix what skills I had. So I knew that I was rather organized. I knew that I was good at training others. I learned that through my study groups, like teaching information to others. And I also had some experience with medical communications based off my experience working in the hospital. And so after sort of honing in on what skills I had, I'm able to now actually utilize that for my current consulting career, where I am focusing on sending out change management communications for a physical therapy group as we transition them from Zoom to Office or Microsoft Teams. So
You mentioned my favorite thing, which is skills and core competencies. And then Samantha, you wanted to respond to this one as well. And I know you've already alluded to those core competencies and some of those transferable skills too.
Yeah, so before starting at Accenture, I worked as a contract employee for a social media management company, and I did their social media. So it's a little confusing, but basically I helped them promote themselves on like Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. And I found that that job for me, especially like navigating the heightened part of the pandemic, was a little bit depressing. It was very negative, and I was like, I got to get out of here. So I started applying for new roles, and I was mostly looking at marketing at the time, but I found consulting through one of my sorority sisters who also works at Accenture, and she was saying how you can change a lot with consulting, and basically no 2 days are going to be the same. You can be on a project for 3 months, you could be on there for years. It's up to you to decide, but if you enjoy something, then you have opportunities to grow. But if you don't like it, it's temporary. So it's always like a plus side. So I really enjoy it so far.
Great. So,
Can
go ahead, Leah.
Yeah, so interesting. We've talked a lot about domain knowledge and core competencies and knowing something specifically enough to be able to advise on it. One of the key things about consulting, I've always, well, for the last about 15 years, I've worked in IT or IT adjacent roles, but there's variety that you can find in consulting that you don't find anywhere else. So in the last year, I have worked as an IT consultant for a management consulting firm, like a very large management consulting firm. I was a product owner for an HVAC technology for a commercial HVAC company. And then I'm currently rolling onto a project with a major bank in their security division. So like, talk about three completely different paths, right? But I'm doing sort of the same thing. I'm really doing a lot of product ownership and coaching in how to transition companies to more agile methodologies and really understanding how to do training for these new systems. But I'm getting to do it in a lot of different environments, and that makes it a lot more exciting than sitting in an office and working on the same thing day after day for years, which I've also done. So
thank you for adding that. You all have done a wonderful job describing some of the core skill sets and competencies that you utilize in your day-to-day. So I'll just kind of direct this to the group if you have any last adds to that, and we can always come back to it. But are there any others? I'll just open this up that you all want to highlight. We can always come back to this one too with the whole group as well. But Molly, it looked like you had one to add.
Yeah, I would say kind of a mixture. Sam alluded to it, but emotional intelligence and soft skills and kind of just being a people person. You're going to be talking to everyone from your internal firm, PPMD, to maybe a CIO of the client that you're working with, to maybe offshore technical people within your branch. So you just have to be able to speak to different types of people and understand what requirements are going to be needed for each type of person you're speaking with. And you need to do that genuinely. So I think just, one of those things that they talk about is like the elevator pitch or the airport pitch. It's like, who do you want to spend 5 hours stuck in an airport with? It's kind of legitimate. If you're staffed on a project for a long time, you have to kind of like the people you're around. So I think a lot of those people skills, which are pretty, fluid, are very important.
Awesome. So The way that we've structured this Q&A today is very similar to how we often structure our conversations about career exploration. We've talked a lot about what do I enjoy doing? You all brought up something that I believe to be just as equally important. What don't I enjoy doing? What experiences did I get to have in order to come to that conclusion? So now I want to transition to day-to-day functions. What does a consultant do? And obviously we don't have the time and bandwidth to cover all of that today because it will vary between everyone on this panel. But Leah and Samantha, can you highlight that for us? What does a day in the life look like, knowing that it's probably going to look different every day?
So for me, usually I'm working on an agile project. So it sort of depends on where we are in the project. Are we at the beginning of the project where we're trying to understand the problem, we're trying to socialize with the client and get to the point where we can plan a solution? Are we coming in just to implement? Am I writing user stories, which are basically like task tickets for software developers? Or am I working on training? It really depends on where we are in the project. And honestly, for the last few weeks, it's been sitting at home and just getting paid because I was waiting for my background check to go through. So, you know, every day looks really different. Today I had one meeting and I know it's the calm before the storm. I got to meet my product owner and just chit chat with him a little bit and talk about what it's like to be back in the office, because he is, and it was a full office, which was really jarring to see after 2 years of just looking at one person on the screen usually. But I know that in the coming weeks, there are probably going to be days where I'm on call 6 or 7 hours a day, just trying to wrap my head around the product and what I need to know about it to be able to put together my deliverables, which for this product are going to be like training materials for end users. So it really just, it depends. It varies from project to project for me, but that's another thing that I like about it. It's usually different, but I know enough so that I can plan out the next few days or few weeks of what I'm going to be doing.
Thank you. How about you, Sam?
Yeah, so we're still remote right now for Accenture. There is an option to go in office at like, I think 50% capacity. And I've only had the chance to go in once so far, but that was like very surreal experience because basically my entire professional career has been through this remote environment. So seeing people in person was different, but that was like a little tangent, sorry. But when it comes to my day-to-day, every day is going to be different, of course. As an analyst, it's a more entry-level role. So I do have meetings, but not as much as like somebody who might be like a manager or a consultant level at Accenture. And I also do like a lot of tasks in between. So I might update PowerPoints, I might help with Excel spreadsheets. I also do trainings in my downtime, different things to keep my skill set going and always growing. There's never like a dull moment. And there's also like great opportunities to get involved. So they have employee resource groups that I highly recommend. It's kind of like being in a club, like at school. So you can join like the African-American one, you can join the women's LGBT, etc. There's a lot of options for you. So I also do that as well in my free time outside of work.
That was a wonderful transition to our next question, which is how do you navigate your own intersectional identities and lived experiences in business careers broadly, but especially in consulting professions? And Michael, we'll have you kick us off with that one.
Yeah, you sort of took the first half of my answer, which was those resource groups. So resource groups are an excellent thing that, you know, a lot of consulting firms supply, which is just a space for you to, you know, voice your opinions and feel like, you know, your identity matters to the company, which it does. I mean, we've touched on this multiple times, but, you know, we are a people business. Like we are not just selling consulting, we're selling ourselves to the client. And, you know, having the perspective of, you know, or having empathy for the client is probably one of the bigger skills you need. Understanding, you know, what struggles they're going through, understanding, you know, what their background is, helps you really, I would say, solve a problem faster and, you know, more effectively. So yes, the resource groups are a big thing. And also, I heard a term yesterday during our Q1 meeting. One of our board members said fiercely human. And I think that, you know, consulting is a fiercely human business. So, you know, a lot of, I think someone spoke to imposter syndrome earlier. Sometimes you think your background might be, you know, an obstacle in consulting and that, you know, oh, I'm not fit for this, but at the end of the day, they hired you for what you know, and they want you to use that to your advantage. So I am trying to, stop viewing my my background as a shortcoming, but as an advantage, and really leverage that to promote my career.
Thank you. And then lastly, before we open this up a bit, how can the folks in the room today continue to explore pathways in consulting? So we'll start with Melinda, and then Molly, you had some things to add as well, I believe.
Yep. So really just developing what I found has facilitated the most conversations. This goes all the way back to, LinkedIn and seeing what's out there and knowing what people are actively doing is develop, that domain knowledge term we said. So if you have an interest with healthcare, know what kind of apps healthcare companies are commonly using. And so even if it's not a consultant that you come up to and be like, hey, do you have role or are you actively implementing any type of ERP software? And that automatically puts you in a conversation with, oh yeah, we have a such and such group that implements SAP or Oracle EBS. And I know those people and I know if there's a need or not there. And that's kind of just a general recruiting networking question. But it's like having that little sliver of knowledge about what could possibly go on gets you to the right pathways faster is my point there. So whatever you can do to develop that piece now, even when you're like, I have no idea, I'm throwing out these terms, I don't know what on earth an ERP system is. They know that you've probably only seen a handful if you've got that degree background or you've done your own private research, but that gives you a face to an interest, and they can streamline what they think is a possibility for you when interacting with those individuals. So that is my advice there.
Molly, do you want to close us out before we open up?
Sure. I think making your connections and networking. So if you're interested in consulting, find people at DePaul, if you guys are DePaul students, or, some other facet that you have a connection with people, reach out on LinkedIn, learn more about what they do, learn more about their industry. I think another thing that Melinda kind of alluded to is I know when we interview at Deloitte specific to the data and analytics practice, we're required to ask interview questions related to the industry. So if you're interested in a specific industry or career path, make sure you're up to date on what's going on in the news, kind of like the hot topics, maybe like Melinda mentioned ERP, so know some of the buzzwords so you sound like you're kind of up to date in your interviews as well. A little goes a long way. So even if you can just mention some acronyms, that might save you face where some people couldn't do that. So I think kind of just prepping before you go into conversations, networking or interviews is good.
Thank you.
Can I weigh in here?
What was that?
Can I weigh in really quick?
Please do.
Melinda said something I thought was really interesting, and it's just getting to know things within the industry. Sort of adjacent to that, I would say, don't be afraid to use a position as a stepping stone. And this may be my own trauma speaking, trying to look for a job for the first time as an adult during the recession, where you couldn't get a call back for a job. It was really rough. And a lot of my friends were just going to get another degree because they didn't know what else to do. I found sort of later on that if you take a job in a specific industry, it may not be exactly what you want, but just getting to that one industry can really make your resume take off. So when I moved into a consulting role at Walgreens, after that, the companies that are reaching out to me, I don't look for jobs. Recruiters just show up in my inbox. They come to me, and they're much higher level companies just because I did get that one job, working for Walgreens corporate. And then after that, the American Medical Association just showed up in my inbox. And after that, it was larger companies like Deloitte, which never would have looked at my resume before that. But once you get to a certain level, really the organizations just kind of they all look the same. They're all those higher level organizations that you want to be working for. So if you're not able to find something when you need it, that's right where you want it to be, don't be afraid to take something that's in that right industry or in an adjacent industry, because that could be the stepping stone that you need to get you to where you want to be.
That is phenomenal advice, especially for folks navigating out of the ordinary, to say the least, market. So thank you for that ad. Folks, feel free to unmute or put questions in the chat. I want to give us what I always refer to as recess, where we can circle back to topics or bring up any that we didn't spend time on today that you had questions about. Sri, you have a question. Go ahead.
Yep. Thanks, guys. A lot of inputs, a lot of perks there. So my question is, while applying for interviews, will the employer look for the branding? So let's say I worked on these companies, IBM, Accenture, kind of. So will that matter while recruiting? Anyone can answer that.
Mute yourselves and jump in as you please.
Can you repeat the second part of the question? I'm sorry.
That's fine. So I was saying that whether the brand value influence the employer to take in your resume and consider you as a potential employee. So will that matters?
I'll try to on this one.
Oh, yeah. Brian, you go ahead.
Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Michael. So I'll just say it does and it doesn't. For me, I had plenty of brand name recognition, PNC Capital Markets, Morgan Stanley. So that definitely helped me. But what really matters at the end of the day is what you say. I've had hundreds of interviews and I've been rejected for the vast majority of them. So like I could have all these name brands, but at the end of the day, it's what you say matters.
Yeah, and I'll piggyback off of that. Like Brian said, like it doesn't. You're selling your skills, and if you can communicate what you know, like I said, like the skills will take you further than the brand itself in some cases.
Absolutely. The skills will absolutely take you further. But I will say that I think that if you have the experience with those companies, if you've done an internship, if you did a consulting gig, if anything like that you should put on your resume, you should absolutely do it, because that might get your foot in the door. If I've got 400 resumes sitting on my desk, I'll be like, hey, this guy was interviewed, or this guy worked at these great companies. Let's see what he has. And that might make me pull your resume first. Once you get in the door, you have to sell yourself, right? But having that on your resume, like absolutely take advantage of it. And if you don't, that doesn't mean that you won't get a job, obviously, but use whatever you have to get yourself in the door, and so that you have the opportunity to sell yourself.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Wonderful. I see one came in the chat, so I'll read that off and verbalize that. How is the work-life balance as a consultant? Anyone want to take that one?
I can start with that, Annie. I think everyone kind of alluded to, they work on different projects in different industries. So I think it's going to fluctuate. For me, I'm part of a global practice. So I'll have calls at 3 a.m. with India or 4 a.m. with Europe. But that also means that during the day at 2 p.m. I can run to Target. So I think it kind of just depends what your boss is going to ask of you. But a lot of consulting is the leeway to manage your own schedule. Put your clients first as long as you're available when they need you to be available. I think that's really the strong point. I don't know if anyone else has different experience, but I know at Deloitte, it's very, manage your own time, just be available. And we all have work phones, right? So we're always kind of available, but.
I would just add to that, like at the analyst level, it might not be as demanding because we don't tend to work with people internationally. It's usually a client within the US. So they don't ever demand me to be on like in the middle of the night or anything. That's not anything to worry about, like entry level at all. And I'm pretty sure, like how Molly was mentioning, they'll ask you before that, like you would know if that was expected of you. But also don't be afraid to set boundaries. Like if you have something firm and you're like, I need to go to this doctor's appointment, or I need to like pick up my kid after school, or whatever it may be, don't be afraid to block out time on your calendar and set those firm boundaries, because most people will be respectful of that. It's just when you have that time, just make up that work. But I haven't had anybody tell me like, you can't take PTO, you can't do this so far. So don't be afraid.
I would say it's really important, like Sam said, to set your boundaries, but not necessarily around when you're not available.
It looks like you've got your ad blocker on. Ads
What
help
is
us
that? Is
keep
that mine?
Pandora free and prevent any playback issues with your music. Tap
That's
now
weird.
to disable ad blocker and keep things running smoothly.
That's an antivirus, I guess. So.
I have never heard that. I didn't know my Pandora was on. Thanks, guys. Yeah. So just, I would say make sure that you know your own boundaries. Turn off your computer at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, whatever time that is, because especially in IT, it's really easy to get sucked in and suddenly it's 2 a.m. and you're still working. So make sure that when you're setting those boundaries, you set them for yourself too, because nobody, it's really rare that someone's going to tell you to stop working and stop killing it. Just know that you will burn out. So I don't recommend that.
Thank you all. We got a question about consulting organizations or trade associations. I am going to put a pin in that one, as I know, Molly, you had some closing remarks on that thread. One question we got in addition to that is, what does the typical interview process consist of? How many rounds, presentations, case interview questions? Can someone speak to that, please?
I can
I
jump
can
in
take.
that. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
We'll go
Go ahead,
Molly,
Brian.
then Brian.
I'll also drop a resource in the chat after this. We actually partner with my consulting offer who gives fantastic help with interview prep, but I think it depends on the level you're interviewing for. I think the higher the level manager and up, you're going to have probably more rounds and more in depth. Whereas if you're an associate, probably less interviews. So Brian, I'll kind of pass it to you to add to that.
Yep. Thanks, Molly. And so just speaking fresh-ish off the recruiting process and helping others get jobs in consulting as well. It's just prepping for the case. I recommend personally Victor Chang. He provides a free resource online to understand the frameworks of case prep. It's all on YouTube. Videos are like 7 to 10 years old, so just it'll be blurry, but you can, as long as you can hear and take notes, you'll be fine. And then or subtitles. And then it's mainly just meeting with someone multiple times, not being weird, and then understanding your cases and frameworks. And they ultimately, when I say they, the interviewer ultimately wants to know how you think. So if you can process through, even if you don't get the answer straightforward, as long as your thinking process is solid, you should be in good hands.
Thank you. And then we'll close out on this one before we wrap up for today, knowing that we'll put you in contact with these folks. What are some misconceptions that others, or perhaps you, may have had or have about consulting, or were there any surprises once you entered the field?
I think the biggest surprise for me was the diversity of backgrounds that are in consulting. I remember at orientation day, everyone's like finance, business. And then with my first project, someone was like, yeah, I used to be an elementary school teacher up until like 10 years ago. And someone's like, oh yeah, I used to work in the hotel industry doing, whatever line of work they were doing. So it's kind of wild how many different backgrounds can be on one project. I think was the biggest surprise. Anyone could be a consultant is pretty much what I'm getting at.
Very cool. Well, folks, with that, I am going to turn it over to Molly, as you had some internal DePaul pitches to continue engaging with the consulting profession. And then just so you all are aware, we will be sending a follow-up email to everyone who attended the event with some of the resources that we referenced today, as well as contact information if you'd like to take the conversation offline. I and some of my colleagues will be around for a few minutes after the event as well as we wrap up. But Molly, I'll turn it over to you so that these folks can hear about how they can continue this conversation within the DePaul community.
Sure, thanks, Annie. I'm going to drop some information in the chat. It is the contact info for DePaul Consulting Club. Again, we are open to undergrad, grad, alumni, faculty. So basically, any of you should fit the bill. And then also our link to our last event of the quarter, we're doing a Women in Consulting panel. 4 women speakers will be talking about their career journeys, as well as consulting tips and tricks, interview, case prep. stuff like that. But the consulting club, we host speaker events where we bring in speaker guest consultants, speaker firms. We just did a speaker firm event with Slalom Consulting. We also do a lot of case interview prep for those of you who had questions about that. The resource I popped in the chat a couple minutes ago was my consulting offer, which also has a lot of tips for interviewing, understanding how to apply to firms, just kind of narrowing down your list, as well as case interview prep and just anything you might be concerned about. They're also going to be our spring quarter kickoff event with my consulting offer, so stay tuned for that. But if you join us on DHub and join our DL, you'll get all of our club updates. So hope to see you guys there.
Wonderful, thank you. And then I am dropping in the chat the information for the Business Entrepreneurship Consulting LinkedIn page, where we'll share all that Molly covered, as well as jobs, professional opportunities, professional development opportunities, and general community building. But with that, thank you folks so much for joining us today. If you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out. I will put my email in the chat as well. I know we had some questions about passports, things like that for classroom experiences. So my email's in the chat if you have any additional questions or follow-up. And I'll hang out for a bit as well. Thank you so much to our panelists. Really wonderful to hear all of those different perspectives, and we appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you all. Thanks for the session. Thanks, Annie.
Of course, feel free to link in if anyone's interested. I'm happy to talk to anyone after